In this video, we're going to go over a 2-rope stemless TK. Now this TK is a bit different than the first one we learned in class in that it's not going to have so much of a vertical stem as the regular TK. You'll actually see that the top wraps kind of come in with much more of a V formation, and that your initial X friction will be almost right above your single column for the wrists. And what this does is that it really holds your bottom shoulders in place, drawn back, because you get that downward pull as well. And that can be really beneficial for bottoms who are hypermobile in their shoulders, as it can hold them more in place and prevent any movement that could cause harm to them. And some bottoms just like that feeling of a bit more of a pull, a bit more of a snugness, so on and so forth. The version that I'm going to be teaching of this stemless TK is the one that Creative Mayhem teaches. And I'm going to go ahead and start by placing Thomas's arms into position. Now, I'm not going to walk through with the amount of detail that we do in our other TK videos. I'm really going to focus on how the stemless TK is different than the stemmed TK. So with that, I'm going to bring his arms into position. And I know with Thomas here that when I do the stemless TK with 2 ropes, my add-on ends up in kind of a weird position where I end up having to place the add-on in the back, but it has a ton of extra rope in it. And so to reduce that, I'm actually going to do a 3-wrap single column here around the wrists. Really, I'm just burning rope here at the beginning instead of having all of that extra rope here later. So this isn't required for the structural part of the tie. A 2-wrap single column is just fine, but just knowing that with his body I'm going to have a lot of extra rope otherwise, I'm going ahead and do 3 wraps around. Just getting a little bit of extra rope in for my bite. Get these to lay nice and flat. And again, we want to make the single column loose enough that they can switch their hands comfortably positioned, but not so high that we end up with that up in the center of the back. Especially with the stemless TK, we want this to really optimize the space here so that you're not wasting that vertical space that you need when you pull in the top wraps, like you'll see later. So I'm doing a Somerville bowline. You can do your single column of choice. Before I move on, I like to just double check, as Thomas did earlier, that he can move his arms. That looks comfortable here, and I certainly wouldn't want my single column any bigger than that. And so when we're building the top wrap for the stemless TK, you want to kind of employ this trick with your tension, where you want to do loose around the first shoulder, the first time you hit a shoulder, tight when you come around here on the second shoulder. We're going to go tight again back here over the first one, and then loose around the second one. And the reason that you want to do this is that we're about to pull all these ropes down to form where we want to place our X friction. And when you do that, this line and this line are the 2 that are going to tighten the most. So you want them to start out a little bit looser, and that way when they get tightened, everything ends up even on the top wrap. So the first thing that really makes this stemless TK different than a regular TK is this X friction. So when we build a normal stem TK, we bring our rope behind the stem and we pull up to form that X friction. For a stemless TK, you're actually going to take your other hand, grab the top wraps here along with the stem, and guide them all together in the center of the back like this. So like I talked about before, that has a much stronger V in the back than a regular stemmed TK. And it's just a good point either before or just when you put that X friction in to check in with your bottom to make sure that that top wrap didn't get too tight, because this action of pulling it all together here in the back does tighten these lines down, and we want to make sure that they're feeling okay for the bottom. So Thomas, how does that top wrap feel?
It feels good. It definitely tightened up when you brought the top wrap down to start your X friction.
Yep.
But it does not feel overly tight.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. When you're making your X friction, this is the exact same pattern as for a stem TK. I do like to keep this hand here till you get the first, at least the first half of that X friction in, to really encourage these wraps to stay right where I want them. So it can even help to like switch hands like that, so I can finger hook like this. And once you've got that first half of the X friction, this isn't going anywhere. So I'm gonna go ahead and tuck these ends in really quick while I dress the wraps here for Thomas, because you can see, you know, we still have a cross in our top line, as you do when you build the X friction, and we do not want that here on the arms. Yeah, encourage that cross to be right here by the X friction. Placement feeling okay?
Mm-hmm. Yep, feels good.
Awesome. So you can see, because I did that 3-banded single column, I actually need to add on rope right here. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. You might find when if you have a partner that you tie with regularly, you might experiment with these little tips and tricks for getting those rope add-ons to be where you want to be. Sometimes people will do a third wrap on the top wrap here. I had someone that I used to tie with where if I would do 3 wraps on the top wrap, I would end up with the perfect placement for the second rope and not a lot of rope left at the end. So go ahead and experiment with that. I would not recommend putting 3 wraps on the bottom wrap, but you could try that on the top wrap. You can try 3 bands on the single column. Go ahead and experiment that with the, the amount of lengths of rope that you have and the size of your bottom. So with that, we do make the second wrap very similarly to how we do before. So I know that Thomas likes his rope placements a little higher here, so I'm going to come high in the back, but then I have a curve downward in the front to get under the chest tissue. And Thomas has these beautiful broad shoulders that I can just grab the ropes past. And you want to try to make these even here as you're coming around. Thomas, how does that placement feel? It's pretty high for the second wrap.
That feels good. Yeah, I'll let you know once the second rope goes on.
For sure, thank you. And definitely with this stem TK, your top wrap will probably be tighter than your second wrap, and that's okay. What you don't want is then to like really crank down on the second wrap to try to, overcompensate. It's okay for the second wrap to be a little looser than the top wrap. I think I even might have mine just a tad too loose. Okay, so another change here from the stemmed TK, just getting those in the right spot, is that we are going to do an L friction here instead of doing our half moon friction. Because the half moon friction, you have to put rope in between these 2 wraps, and really with this stemless TK, we want to encourage the wraps to stay close together. So kind of from here on out, every time you do an L friction, you want to grab everything. So for this L friction to lock off the second wrap, I'm actually you come still behind the stem, cross back over the stem, and then I'm going to go behind everything for my L friction here. After that, we do our Kanukis as usual. So, feel free to reference one of our other TK videos on how we do our Kanukis, typically going from bottom to top instead of top to bottom. But go ahead and build your Kanukis as you usually do. And then when you get back to the stem here, we're going to want to do an additional L friction after that Kanuki. Excuse me. So go ahead and come behind the stem, cross back over. Remember, we want to, every time we do an L friction, we're going to grab everything. So go ahead and come back up behind the Kanuki, the bottom wrap, and the top wrap. Come back down and behind the stem to finish our L friction. I'm gonna come over and do my last Kanuki. And then you can see here that I actually have just not quite enough rope yet. I potentially could have made this single column just a little tighter to get myself more rope here at the end. So I'm gonna go ahead and add on a shorty just so I can show you how to finish this. But again, something you can play around with when you're building TKs is little modifications to try to end up with the right amount of rope here. So I'm just gonna go ahead and tuck these in really quick and grab another piece of rope over here. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and add on that rope with a bit of extra here just so that knot ends up nice here in the back. So as before, we're going to go ahead and do an L friction, capturing, again, everything. Now, what you want to avoid when you're doing all of these L frictions is actually doing them, say, like over the wrap here. Because you can see if I wrap around, and by wrap I mean this single column, if I wrap around the single column here, that will actually tighten it down over Thomas's wrists, which is what I do not want to do. So I want to try to keep this L friction above the Somerville bowline knot here. It's okay if it goes over wraps where you had your L friction before. That bulk in the back doesn't really matter too much, especially with this laying nice and flat. So again, we do our L friction, come up to grab everything. So top wrap, bottom wrap, left and right Kanuki. Come back around. And really we are done here. Now we just want to lock off. There I was just squishing so all my L frictions lay nice towards the center. And I want this to look kind of symmetrical, and I want to encourage everything to come together here in the back. So I'm actually going to do a half friction, but capture, a half hitch, excuse me, and capture all of the wraps here. So it kind of looks like an L friction, right? But your rope is coming over on the inside so that you're creating a half hitch. Go ahead and tighten that down, and this stemless TK is complete.